Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Bava Metzia, pages 95 through 101, Sadi Hey through Kuf Aleph. 95. Mimashma shenemar ba'alav imo lo yishalem. Since the Torah says if the owner is with the borrower, then the borrower will not pay in a case of a shivura v'meta, the animal dies or gets broken on the job. I would know by inference that if the owner is not with the borrower, then he will have to pay. So why does the Torah use both verses in the affirmative and in the negative regarding the relationship between or the connection to the owner and borrower? To tell you the following point. If the owner was in the service of the borrower at the time of the act of borrowing, it's unnecessary for the owner to be with the animal and the borrower at the time of the breakage or death of the animal in order for the borrower to gain an exemption from paying. However, being together at the hour of the breakage is insufficient. It is required in order to have the exemption for the owner to have been with the borrower at the hour of lending. 96. What happens if an owner of an animal tells his servant to go and be hired out or borrowed out together with his cow to the borrower? So both the animal and the human servant are now going to be working for the borrower. Is this sufficient to result in an exemption in the case of Shvu Rava Meita? Does the Eved have the same status as the owner of the animal himself? So the Gemara tries to answer this question and addresses the matter of Shlucho Shel Adam Kamoto, a person's agent like himself, and then sort of sidesteps that issue, but concludes ultimately that the exemption will exist in this case. Why? Because Yad Eved ki Yad Rabo. The hand of the servant is like the hand of the master. 97. Hashoel Tapara. What happens if someone borrows an animal and it's a curious arrangement? Half a day the animal is borrowed and half of the day the animal is rented. Or it was rented today and borrowed tomorrow. Or there were two animals, one was borrowed and one was rented. And then an animal died, umeta. Hamash'il omer, the lender says, Shu'ula meta, the borrowed one died. B'yom shaita shula meta, or the day in which it was borrowed it died. Or b'shah shaita shula meta, or the hour in which it was borrowed it died. Meaning, you, the borrower, now have to pay me to compensate me for the lost animal. V'hala omer, and as for the borrower, he doesn't, how's he responding to this assertion? Any yodea, if he says, I don't know whether it was the borrowed one or the rented one, or the hour of the borrowing or the hour of the renting, chayav. 98. Hashoel tapara ushlacha biyad beno biyad avdo biyad shlucho or biyad beno avdo v'shlucho shel shoel umeta patur. Let's say a person borrows an animal and the owner sends the animal in the hand of his son or the hand of his servant or the hand of his agent or in the hand of the son of the borrower or the hand of the son of the borrower or the agent of the borrower or the slave of the borrower. In all these scenarios, if the animal were to die in transit, having never reached the hand of the shoel of the borrower, patur, the borrower is going to be exempt because it was never really in his possession. However, the Mishnah goes on to say that if this arrangement was prearranged, and with the agreement of the shoel that either his son or the other guy's son is going to send it along the way, so that the acquisition has effectively happened before the animal gets to the physical possession of the shoel, then he would be liable. 99. Haiman is the Azul Chavitza the Tamri Mechavero. So a person is buying a cake of dates from his fellow. The ispa chamishim tamri. There are 50 dates in this cake. Cake of dates. Agav hadadi mizdabin benun. If they were all together in a cake, they're worth 50 nachechada. 50 minus 1 equals 49. Chada chada mizdabin. If they were sold individually, they'd be worth nun. 50, one apiece. So lehedyot mishalem nachichada. If there was a case of liability of a shomer, watching over this cake of dates, then the hedyot would have to pay 49, the value of the cake as a cake rather than as an individual fruit. However, if this was sanctified property, the repayment of the hektish is always the maximum possible payment. So it would be the full 50, as though they were sold individually, plus the chomesh for misappropriation of sanctified goods. Kuf. 100. Hayalu bet avadim. Person had two slaves. Echad gadol echad katan. One was big and one was small. Halokech omer gadol lakachti. The buyer says, I bought the big one. Hello, Menudea. And the seller says, I don't know which one you bought. The seller has to give the buyer the big one because the buyer is insisting that's the one I bought. No one's actively disputing it. If the seller says, I sold the small one, and the buyer says, I don't know what I bought. In the buyer is only going to get the small one because the seller is insisting that it was the small one that was sold and no one's contesting it. Kufal 101. Hamaskir bait lechavero. If you rent out a house to your fellow, during the rainy season, you can't evict the tenant, and the rainy season extends from Sukkot until Passover. What if it's the summer season? Shloshim yom. Then, if you have to give at least 30 days advance notice prior to the rainy season that there's going to be an eviction. If you're in the cities where there's always a housing shortage, then regardless of whether it's the rainy season or the summer season, you have to give Yud Bet Chodesh a full 12 months of notice before an eviction. And as for storefronts, so this is commercial rather than residential, whether it's in the small towns or the big cities, you have to give the commercial enterprise 12 months to find new premises. Rashbag and Rashbag says if it's a storefront for the Nachtomim, the bakers, or the Tzaboin, the dyers, you got to give them 3 years to find a new place. Why? Because they extend on long-term credit, and they have to have time to collect the debts that are owed to them, and so they need more lag time before they can change their venue. Everyone have a great week.